Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Julian Hayes always believed he'd built something solid with Rebecca. 10 years of marriage, a comfortable life in Seattle, successful careers, and a partnership that seemed to run perfectly. He was an architect, she was a corporate lawyer at one of the city's most prestigious firms. They didn't have kids by mutual choice, preferring to invest in international travel, fine dining experiences, and an active social life that connected them with interesting people. Julian always respected Rebecca's independence. He never questioned her frequent business trips or long hours at the office. Trust was the foundation of everything, or at least that's what he believed until that Thursday that changed everything. Rebecca came home around 8 that evening, as she always did. She dropped her purse on the entryway console, kicked off her heels, and walked into the living room where Julian was reviewing plans for a new project. She didn't sit beside him like she usually would. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed and delivered words that sounded rehearsed. I need to figure out who I am without you. I think we should take some time apart. Julian looked up from the blueprints, certain he'd misunderstood. What? Rebecca sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. I need space. I need to find myself, you know. Grow as a person. Understand my true essence without always being defined by a relationship. Every word sounded like a cheap self-help cliché, completely disconnected from their reality. Julian felt the floor vanish beneath his feet. There hadn't been any recent fights, no crises, nothing to justify such a sudden declaration. He tried to process it, tried to make sense of it. Rebecca, where is this coming from? Did something happen? We can talk about what you're feeling. She shook her head impatiently. It's not about you, Julian. It's about me. I need this time. I've already rented an apartment downtown. I'm moving out this weekend. The coldness in her voice, the fact that she'd planned everything without consulting him or even giving him a chance to process or discuss it, this wasn't a request, it was an announcement. Anger rose in Julian's throat, but he forced himself to stay calm. How long have you been thinking about this? Rebecca avoided his gaze. A few months. But I only recently became clear about what I need to do. A few months. She'd spent months planning to leave him while sleeping beside him every night, making vacation plans with him, smiling and pretending everything was fine. That night, Rebecca slept peacefully in the guest room, as if she'd merely commented on the weather. Julian, on the other hand, couldn't close his eyes. He lay in the bed that suddenly felt too big, staring at the ceiling while his mind raced. Something was deeply wrong. People don't just decide to destroy a 10-year marriage because they need to find themselves. There had to be more to it. And the more he thought about it, the more troubling pieces began to fall into place. The frequent trips that seemed to have increased over the past 2 years, the messages she quickly deleted when he walked into the room, the weekends she claimed to be working but came home with a sparkle in her eyes that had nothing to do with legal briefs, and the new lingerie he'd found in her drawer weeks earlier, still tagged, that she said she'd bought just to feel good about herself. The next morning, after Rebecca left for the office without even having coffee with him, Julian made a decision. He wasn't going to sit around waiting for answers she clearly had no intention of giving. He wasn't going to be the fool who accepted empty platitudes while his life crumbled. He grabbed his phone and quickly searched for private investigators in Seattle. He found several, but one stood out: Harrison Private Investigations, specializing in marital infidelity cases. The website was discreet and professional, filled with testimonials from satisfied clients who'd uncovered painful but necessary truths. Julian called immediately. The voice that answered was deep and calm. Harrison Investigations, Marcus speaking. Julian explained the situation plainly and directly: the sudden separation request from his wife, his growing suspicions, and his need to know the truth before making any decisions. Marcus listened without interrupting, then said, I completely understand your situation. I've handled cases like this for 15 years. Usually, when someone suddenly asks for separation claiming they need to find themselves, there's already someone else involved. I can start the investigation today. I'll need some basic information about your wife, her routine, places she frequents. Julian provided everything: Rebecca's full name, office address, car make and license plate, and her usual schedule. Marcus guaranteed absolute discretion and quick results. I'll follow her over the next few days. If there's something to uncover, I'll find it. I'll keep you updated daily. The next 3 days were a silent torture. Julian maintained his normal routine, working on his projects and eating dinner alone while Rebecca spent increasingly more time away from home. She barely spoke to him, always in a hurry, always with excuses about important meetings and tight deadlines. He didn't confront her or ask questions, he just watched and waited for Marcus's reports. The first report arrived on day 2 via encrypted email. Marcus had followed Rebecca from the moment she left the office at 6 p.m. Instead of heading straight to the apartment she claimed to have rented, she drove to a 5-star hotel downtown, the Fairmont Olympic. She parked in the underground garage and went up to the lobby. Marcus managed to discreetly photograph her in the elevator, clearly dressed far too nicely for a simple trip to a new apartment. She met a man at the entrance of the hotel bar, tall, with neatly trimmed gray hair and an impeccable suit. They greeted each other with a kiss on the lips that was definitely not professional. Marcus identified the man, Tyler Morrison, senior partner at the same firm where Rebecca worked. The second report came the next day and was even more devastating. Marcus had done a background check on Tyler Morrison. Married for 22 years, 3 adult children, living in Bellevue. One of Seattle's most respected attorneys, specializing in corporate law, with an impeccable reputation, and having an affair with Rebecca. Marcus had tracked their movements over recent weeks through credit card records accessed by means Julian preferred not to question. Expensive dinners at upscale restaurants, always on the same nights Rebecca claimed to be working late. Reservations at boutique hotels, some in Seattle, others in nearby cities like Portland and Vancouver. The pattern was clear and consistent. But the worst was yet to come. On the third day, Marcus delivered the final report in person. They met at a discreet cafe far from downtown. Marcus placed a thick envelope on the table. "You'll want to brace yourself for this," he said seriously. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Rebecca and Tyler in various locations spanning what appeared to be years, not months, tropical beaches, luxury hotels in New York and San Francisco, candlelit dinners with wine glasses. There were pictures of them entering and leaving hotel rooms, holding hands on streets Julian recognized as places Rebecca had claimed were work trips. One photo in particular stood out: Rebecca and Tyler on the balcony of a resort in Maui, her wearing a dress Julian remembered helping her pick out for a supposed legal conference 2 years earlier. They were embracing, watching the sunset, with expressions of complete intimacy and comfort. Marcus had extracted metadata from the photos he found on social media and through other sources. The affair had been going on for at least 2 years. 2 years of elaborate lies, fake business trips, and weekend work sessions that were actually romantic getaways. Julian felt nausea rise in his throat. Marcus continued, "There's more. Tyler Morrison is being considered for an even higher position at the firm, managing partner. But the firm has strict policies against relationships between partners and subordinate attorneys, especially when one or both are married. If this leaks, it destroys both their careers." Julian looked at the photos spread across the table, undeniable proof of 2 years of betrayal. The anger he felt was cold and calculated, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. That night, when Rebecca came home, Julian was sitting in the living room with a leather folder on the coffee table. She didn't even look at him, heading straight to the bedroom to grab some clothes for her new apartment. "Rebecca, I need to talk to you," he said with a calmness that surprised even himself. She returned to the living room impatiently. "Julian, we've already talked about this. There's nothing left to discuss." He slowly, deliberately opened the folder. Actually, there is. I've spent the last few days figuring out who you really are. He began placing the photos on the table one by one, creating a visual timeline of betrayal: the Maui photo, the San Francisco photo, the Fairmont Olympic photo from 3 days earlier, the photo of her kissing Tyler at a Portland hotel entrance. Rebecca's face transformed completely in seconds. First confusion as she tried to process what she was seeing, then recognition as her eyes widened in realization, and finally pure panic as the color drained from her cheeks. "Julian, where did you get these?" Her voice trembled, all that rehearsed confidence instantly evaporating. Julian leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. "I hired a private investigator. I thought it was strange that you suddenly needed to find yourself. And I was right to be suspicious. 2 years, Rebecca. For 2 years you've been sleeping with Tyler Morrison while I sat here like a fool believing every lie that came out of your mouth." Rebecca tried to regain control, but her hands shook as she picked up one of the photos. "You spied on me? You hired someone to follow me?" The indignation in her voice would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. Julian let out a dry laugh. "Are you seriously trying to make me feel guilty for discovering you're a liar and a cheater? Really? That's your defense?" She dropped the photo and ran her hands over her face. "It wasn't planned. It just happened. Tyler and I connected, and," Julian raised his hand, cutting her off. "Spare me the romantic speech. I don't want to hear about connection or chemistry or any other excuse you've prepared to justify destroying our marriage." Rebecca tried another approach, tears beginning to well up. "Julian, I'm so sorry. I really am. I lost my way, but we can fix this. We can go to couples therapy, I can end things with Tyler, we can start over." He looked at her with something close to pity. "Do you really think I'd want to stay married to someone who could deceive me for 2 years? Someone who looked me in the eyes every night knowing she was sleeping with another man? Who planned romantic trips while pretending to go to work?" His voice rose slightly, anger finally beginning to spill over. "You made me look like a fool, Rebecca. You made me believe we had something real while you built a parallel life with your married boss." She tried to move closer to him, but Julian stepped back. "Don't touch me." The coldness in his voice stopped her mid-step. He pulled another envelope from the folder. "I've already called a lawyer. Divorce papers arrive Monday. And there's more." Rebecca stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "Tyler Morrison is married, isn't he? 22 years, 3 kids. You knew that the whole time." She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Guilt was written all over her face. Julian continued, "I sent a full copy of this dossier to his wife. She deserves to know who she's married to, just as I deserve to know who I was married to." The shock on Rebecca's face was absolute. "You didn't do that." Her voice came out as a horrified whisper. "I did. And I also sent it to your firm's ethics committee. Because, you see, I discovered there's a very clear policy there against relationships between partners and subordinates, especially when one or both are married. Tyler was being considered for managing partner, wasn't he? I doubt that promotion's happening now." Rebecca staggered backward, sinking heavily onto the sofa. "You've ruined my career. You've ruined his career. How could you?" Julian felt an icy calm settle over him. "Me? I didn't destroy anything. You two destroyed your own careers when you decided to crap all over the rules and professional ethics. I just made sure the right people knew the truth." Rebecca began to sob genuinely now, but these weren't tears of remorse. They were tears from someone who finally realized the consequences had arrived. "Tyler's going to hate me. The firm's going to fire me. My reputation is ruined." Julian picked up the folder and stood. "You should have thought of that earlier. Oh, and about that downtown apartment you rented? You won't need it anymore. You can move in immediately. I want you out of this house by Sunday. I'll stay in a hotel until then so I don't have to look at your face. Monday morning, my lawyer will contact yours, if you even have one. If not, I suggest you hire one fast. He walked toward the door but turned back one last time. You said you needed to figure out who you are without me? Consider your wish granted. Now you'll have all the time in the world to find yourself alone. Because Tyler won't stay with you once his wife destroys him, once the firm finds out everything, once his reputation goes down the drain. Men like him don't leave decades-long marriages and brilliant careers for mistresses. They drop the mistresses to try to salvage what they can. His words hit Rebecca like slaps, and Julian saw the exact moment she realized he was right. Tyler wasn't going to save her. She was alone in this. The following days were a whirlwind of controlled destruction. Tyler's wife, Catherine Morrison, reached out to Julian to thank him for his honesty. She confirmed she'd already hired Seattle's top divorce attorney and would make sure Tyler paid dearly for his betrayal. The firm's ethics committee launched a formal investigation. Tyler was placed on immediate administrative leave while they looked into the allegations. Internal documents leaked showing he'd used firm resources to fund some of his trips with Rebecca, constituting serious professional misconduct. Rebecca was also put on leave, and rumors spread quickly through the office hallways. Their carefully built social life, years in the making, collapsed overnight. Mutual friends took sides, and most stood with Julian once the truth came out. Rebecca tried calling Julian several times over the following weeks, but he blocked her number. All communication went through lawyers. She attempted to negotiate more favorable divorce terms, but Julian held all the cards. Evidence of infidelity, her involvement with a married superior, everything worked against her. The process moved quickly since there were no children, only asset division. Julian kept the house, he had the means to buy out her share, and she wasn't in a position to fight hard. The relationship between Rebecca and Tyler didn't survive a week after everything came to light. Catherine Morrison filed for divorce, demanding a highly favorable settlement, and won, leaving Tyler financially devastated. The firm concluded its investigation and, while not formally firing Tyler due to his seniority, made it clear he'd never be considered for leadership roles again. Rebecca, being more junior and replaceable, was subtly pressured to resign, which she did 2 months later. 6 months after that fateful Thursday, the divorce was finalized in a brief, cold hearing. Julian and Rebecca saw each other for the first time since the night of the revelation. She looked visibly different, thinner, with deep under-eye circles, her usual confidence entirely gone. When the judge officially dissolved the marriage, she tried speaking to Julian in the hallway. "Julian, I just wanted to say," he cut her off without looking directly at her. "There's nothing you can say that I want to hear. Good luck with your life." And he walked away, literally and figuratively. Julian rebuilt his life brick by brick. He focused on his work, landed major contracts, traveled to places he'd always wanted to see but Rebecca never cared about. He reconnected with friends he'd neglected during the marriage. He went to therapy to process the betrayal and loss, learning to trust again and realizing that what Rebecca did didn't define his worth or his capacity to be loved. A year after the divorce, he was genuinely happy for the first time in years, realizing he'd been carrying that dead marriage on his back far longer than he'd imagined. Rebecca moved to Portland, trying to restart her career at another firm, but her reputation followed her. The legal community in the Pacific Northwest is smaller than it seems, and stories spread. She eventually found work, but nothing compared to the prestige she once had. Tyler stayed in Seattle, trying to rebuild relationships with children who despised him for betraying their mother. He and Rebecca never spoke again after everything blew up, each blaming the other for the disaster they'd created together. 2 years after the divorce, Julian was in his office when he received a message from an unknown number. It was Rebecca. She'd seen photos of him on social media, smiling on trips, at dinners with friends, clearly thriving and happy. The message read, "I see you're doing well. I'm glad for you. I've finally figured out who I am without you. It's not who I hoped to be. You were right about everything." Julian read the message twice, then deleted it without replying. There was nothing to say. She'd destroyed a decade of partnership, trust, and shared history for a fantasy that only lasted as long as it remained secret. Once exposed to daylight and real consequences, it collapsed like the house of cards it always was. Rebecca discovered who she was without Julian, someone who traded stability for excitement, loyalty for temporary passion, and paid the price with her career, reputation, and self-respect. She finally found herself, but didn't like what she saw. And Julian, who vowed never again to be blinded by naive trust, found something she could never give him: genuine peace and the freedom to build a life with someone who truly deserved to be in it. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.